We're going to start here with immigration and Arizona's controversial Show Me Your Papers law, and it was before the High Court today. And joining us to talk about immigration and beyond, Richard Brodsky, formerly Assemblyman, Senior Fellow at Demos, and a professor at NYU, an all-around special guy. Dominic Carter, political journalist, author. Mike Long, chairman of the New York State Conservative Party, and to his immediate right, our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman. And tonight, you're part of this panel as well here because I want your answer to our question tonight. You see the toll-free number at the bottom of your screen, 888-766-2428. And here's our question. It relates to what the Supreme Court's going to be wrestling with. Is Arizona's immigration law un-American? Well, we're in first position tonight with the latest from the Supreme Court.
I thought that the hearing went very, very, very well. I feel very confident as I walked out of there that we will get a favorable ruling in late June. Arizona has a right, and I, as governor, I felt was somewhat ensured that I had a right to protect the citizens of Arizona.
Well, that there, Arizona Governor Jan Brewer outside the High Court earlier today. She telling the press right after the Supreme Court heard arguments over the constitutionality of Arizona's controversial immigration law, a law that she, in effect, signed while sitting behind the big desk there in the state capitol. But a lot of people say, hey, show me your papers, which requires the local police there to enforce other laws and also be, in effect, immigration agents, that went too far. They can do this. All the cops have to do is, quote unquote, suspect that a person may be in the country illegally. Obama administration, they've challenged the law in federal court shortly after the governor signed it, and that was 2 years ago. Several other states, Alabama, Georgia, Indiana, South Carolina, Utah among them, subsequently passed laws pretty similar to what Arizona now has on the books, some of which are also on hold pending the High Court's decision here. So a lot riding on what comes out of D.C. Now, you may remember when the law was passed, we saw protests coast to coast here, lower courts blocking the most controversial parts of the law. However, it appears, if you read between the lines here, the court may be leaning in favor of the Arizona law. Among others, Justice Antonin Scalia sounding off, saying, quote, what does sovereignty mean if it does not include the ability to defend your borders? Even the more liberal Justice Sonia Sotomayor told the federal government's lawyers that his case was, quote, not selling very well. That's never good to hear. Justice Kagan recused herself because she was involved in the early stages of the challenge. So you only got 8 judges that are left. A decision, it's expected in June. All right, guys, I want to get to the politics of this next segment, but I want to first start with the policy of it. And again, a reminder to everybody, you're going to see at the bottom of your screen both our question, there you go, and the toll-free phone number. So get on the phone lines now. I'll get to your phone calls. But let me go around the table. Richard, I'll start with you. You're sitting on the High Court here, and you're going to be hearing the arguments. Can a state, Arizona, say, hey, I'm on the border. I got a right to defend my citizenry how I see appropriate here. And after all, if somebody's in the country that doesn't have basically the proper paperwork, they're here illegally, so all I'm doing is enforcing the law.
Unfortunately, that's not the case, the constitutional case that the Supreme Court's going to deal with. They're going to deal with very much more rarefied questions. What constitutes probable cause? What constitutes reasonable suspicion? And it's going to be, I think, to some level, much more technical than we're making out. But the question that you asked the viewer is really the right question. Is it un-American? And it certainly is un-American. My ancestors, Mike's ancestors, Dominic's ancestors, for much different reasons.
Mike is already shaking his head, by the way.
Well, wait a minute. We didn't have to jump through these hoops. There was no quota system. I assume your people came here a century ago?
Came here legally.
They came here legally because we actually observed the mandate of the great lady in the harbor, which said, "Give me your poor, your storm tossed, your huddled masses are yearning to be free." They closed the door after they came in.
The key question, legally. The other question is that we have people running across the borders of Arizona. The federal government failed to protect the state of Arizona. Arizona was faced with only one possibility, to protect themselves. The governor and the legislature there did the right thing. Now the Supreme Court is going to rule, and I think the Supreme Court is going to rule that they did the right thing.
Fair enough.
And it is not on America.
Fair enough.
And this
Put
is
the
not
law
about
aside. Are these new laws excluding people good for the United States or bad for the United States?
I think if you're enforcing the laws of the land, I think it's good for the United States.
But are the laws good laws?
You cannot have a nation cannot survive if it has wide open borders.
Let me try.
Okay, wait.
Let me try one more time.
Let me just try and focus though, because to me, I understand the arguments from some in Arizona. I don't agree with the law, but the part that I've never been able to get past, Mike, is how's a cop supposed to look and say, you look American and you don't? Because at the crux of it, that's what the law is giving local law enforcement. They're asking them to play Border Patrol, and they're supposed to look at two different people and say, you look American, you don't look American. I didn't see that written anywhere that anybody got to play, I get to decide who belongs here.
I don't believe that's what the police are going to do or instructed to do.
Well, that's what the law says they can do.
I believe, though, in fact, that if someone causes an infraction to the law, speeding, going through a red light, not stopping at a stop sign, in the process of checking their ID, and they don't have proper ID, the natural question would be, do you have your papers? And
well,
if they don't have,
that's not the case if you got stopped for a traffic violation or if I got stopped for a traffic violation, and that's one of the problems that I have with the law is that it sets up different criteria for different groups of people.
Because I have the right papers.
No,
I have my license.
But if you don't have your driver's license, you're not immediately going to be suspected of being an illegal immigrant, whereas a Hispanic person in Arizona would.
Well, look, let's start with the reality. Reality is there are many, in places like Arizona, there are many drivers that are driving without proper licenses. And
happens in New York too, happens everywhere.
There are plenty of people in New York that are driving without a license and no insurance. In Arizona, because it's so overrun with illegal immigration, they are trying to take steps to control what's happening in their state.
I appreciate that fact, but how they deal with the individuals matters.
Well, how would you like to deal with it?
But if you're going to be dealing with Hispanic Americans differently than you would with Caucasian Americans or African Americans or illegal immigrants, that's a problem.
You know, you're making it sound like the only people that are illegal in Arizona are Hispanic. I submit to you, and I don't know the number, but Arizona has a very large population of Hispanic Americans.
Mike, you don't concede the problem of allowing police to sort of judge who's legal and illegal in a state that is actually overwhelmingly subject to illegal immigration from Mexico? You don't think it's about race and ethnicity at all?
No, I don't believe that at all.
I can't.
I don't believe that at all. And I really feel sorry for people like yourself who feel that and have that in their system, that they feel everyone is out to get somebody.
I didn't say that.
That's not the case. That's what you mean.
Don't feel so sorry for me.
I feel sorry.
It's not what I mean. It's not what I said. I said that in Arizona, the problem is a problem of Latino immigration without papers, and the cops are going to focus on Latinos.
You have the same mentality that says that Commissioner Kelly is not doing the right thing in New York State with stop and frisk, okay?
He's not. I do have that mentality.
Okay.
He's not. So that far.
But Mike,
But he is
Mike,
doing the right thing.
Protection under the law.
But Mike Long, I've known you, about 20 years? Would you still say that if you were African American?
Look, I don't see.
Yes, he would.
Yes, I would. Absolutely would. Look, I think all Americans should be treated equally. White, black, yellow,
You've been consistent
etc.
with that?
All right, I've been consistent. I've always been on target with that. And, you know, I want who has the most crime committed against them here in New York. I mean, you go into the Harlem and the Bronx and to various areas in Brooklyn. It is the minority community. And look,
so that means the police should just stop whoever they want.
No.
And they don't have to justify it, and the chips fall where they may.
You know what?
It means that the police are there to protect those law-abiding minority citizens who need to be protected at times.
Let me bring it back to Arizona for 1 second. What's interesting is the police departments, they don't love this because they're being asked to do something other than enforcing the law. And when you hear some of the police chiefs saying, listen, I was trained on following and enforcing certain laws in the books. My job's not an immigration agent, and I'm not liking the fact that I'm supposed to use discretion as to who to go after and who not to. So, to me, I'm still struggling, Mike. I bet you the majority of the cases are fine, but it's kind of like if we do the stop and frisk, what do you say to the kid? The black, just one second. That one kid, college kid, right? We've all seen the story in the Times. 5 times, the kid's been pulled over, said, assume the position, gets patted down. Now, if I'm walking next to a kid, they're not hassling me. And it's the same kind of thing in Arizona, where if any of the 5 of us are walking through, we're not getting hassled. But if your last name's Gonzalez, it doesn't matter if your father and grandfather were residents, you got a better chance of doing it. And that's my only point. I get the Arizona problems.
Over 90% of the people stopped and frisked are not ticketed, they're not arrested, they're nothing. Mike wants to have us live in a state where the police can stop anybody because the police, not without a legal basis for it, because they may be involved in law enforcement. That's not a conservative point of view. That is a police state mentality.
Conservative point of view is that when hordes of people illegally are going across the border and the state is overrun and the federal government fails to protect its citizens, this is the United States of America, and the President of the United States and his Attorney General turned a blind eye on an overwhelming problem. The governor of Arizona and the legislature did what they had to do, make moves to protect their citizens.